Thank you for joining us today for our conversation around digital communities and the role that they can play in helping scale and provide better access to student support services in the post-secondary landscape. So my name is Katie Kapler. I am co-founder and CEO at Inscribe. I'm joined today by my colleague Danielle Bonner, who will be helping to monitor the chat, keep an eye on questions that are coming in. If you've attended one of our webinars before, you know that Danielle is encouraged to interrupt me as we go along so that we can answer the questions as they come in, kind of weave them into the narrative of the conversation. We would really love, I know that it's a little harder in this webinar format, but we really do want to make this a conversation. So we really encourage questions, comments, anything you want to contribute or are curious about, please put it into the chat. We encourage that over the Q&A because then the fellow attendees can see it as well. And it would be great starting off just to get a sense of who we have. So if you have a minute to just introduce yourself in the chat, maybe let us know what institution or organization you're from, what your role is. And I always say, if there's something specific that you were really curious about or wanted to make sure that we covered today, please put it in there and we will absolutely make sure that we talk about that during our time together. We are recording this session, so we'll send that out to everybody afterward. Of course, feel free to share that with anyone that else at your institution that's interested or maybe wasn't able to attend. Did I miss anything, Danielle?
I believe you covered everything. So yeah, I just encourage everyone to introduce themselves in the chat. And when you do, just make sure you switch it over to everyone instead of the host and the panelists. Thank you.
Oh yeah, it's defaults to hosts and panelists, so we'll switch that. I also, if you heard early, I'm the very end of getting over a cold, so I'm just a little bit hoarse today. That's way better than it was last week. So we're trending in the right direction. So today so for those of you that are not familiar with Inscribe, what is going on here? We are a virtual community platform. We are designed to bring students together with peers, faculty and staff, anyone across your institution that students might rely on for help, support, and encouragement. So our virtual spaces bring these folks together, and then anytime a student has a question, needs help, they can turn to their virtual community to ask it. And then the questions and answers are stored in this searchable repository. Our communities really work across the entire student life cycle. So everything from admissions to student support, academics, and career. Today, we're really going to dig into what we call the student success use case. And I know student success is a broad word, but for today, what we're really going to focus on are all the aspects of student support and student services that exist outside of the classroom. So coaching and advising and financial aid, and how do you really make those services accessible to your learners? And as an organization, we have traditionally focused a lot on, or sort of in our origin, on non-traditional students. So students who are working in parenting, commuting to school, learning online, first generation. And we started with that population because what we found was either because of the time constraints that they were under, or because they just didn't have as much experience themselves or through their family about navigating post-secondary education, that they were often the students that would fall through the cracks, that they wouldn't know where to go for help, or they wouldn't have the time, when help was offered was not convenient for them. And so Inscribe was designed as a way to offer a much more flexible, accessible, simple solution for those learners to always know where to go and to be able to access that support anytime, anywhere. What's interesting is that as we got into this, we found that quote unquote traditional students who are on campus, sometimes struggle with the same things, not knowing where to go or not having the time to get to those support services. So we found that this virtual space concept really has applicability across a broad population of learners. So hello, everyone. I see some people introducing themselves. Great to meet you all. And I see the question about financial aid, so we'll definitely talk about that as we go. So I'm going to just do a few slides as a way of introduction, but then we're going to jump into a demo and we can really dig into what the platform looks like and how it behaves. So why the student support? I talked a little bit about this. I think one of the things that we hear from institutions is student services is a really big bucket. There's lots of different groups that are involved, and often the way that support is delivered can be quite fragmented. So if you need help with financial aid, it's a very different process than if you need help with registration, versus something else. And that becomes very confusing to the students. Moreover, a lot of folks will tell us that they have all this wonderful information, all these great opportunities, and they send emails out to students and it just goes off into the ether. And so they're not sure if the students are hearing and learning about all the great things that they have to offer. We already discussed this idea of students really having an issue and not knowing where to go, or maybe going to the wrong place and then getting handed off to somebody else, and then that person hands them off to somebody else. And by the time, a couple of days have passed, the student's just super frustrated and maybe is ready to give up. And then, we definitely recognize that this population of folks at an institution who are providing support for students are often quite overwhelmed. The ratio of the number of students they're supporting to the number of people in the staff can be quite high. The staff maybe is spending a lot of time answering the same question over and over again, and therefore they don't have time for the deeper conversations, the things where they really should be spending their expertise. And so that is something that we're really thinking about, and we'll talk about how a solution like this can benefit that challenge. But moreover, on the student side, we know, quick access to help, quick access to assistance is more likely to keep students on track. It also has a real connection to things like sense of belonging, sense of peer connectedness, which are more intangible, but really important aspects of a student's experience that will keep them motivated and help them persist when times get difficult. So these are all the challenges, but these are all things that we can solve with a community-based support model. So what are students looking for? Well, they want to get help. And when they want help, they want it to be quick and easy and have that flexibility to get it when they want. So there's this tactical side of what students need, which is just, I'm stuck, I need assistance. What do I do and how do I get it done quickly? And then there is that more human side, that idea that I want to know who my fellow students are. I want to connect with people across my institution that have shared backgrounds and experiences to me. And that's kind of getting at that important thing of sense of belonging. I see a bunch of stuff in the chat and I haven't been tracking it. Danielle, is there anything you need me to pay attention to right away?
Oh, I'm just chattering. That's really all that's happening at this point. We kind of talked a little bit about the webinar that we did yesterday with Mike at WGU. And so if you're following along in the chat, I will share that out as well. Awesome. And then let's see, did I miss anything else? You're going to cover the financial aid. There's someone in here, and I think this is also important to note, that works in faculty support and student communities.
Oh, great.
So something to think about as you go through the rest of the presentation.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you. And then, institutions also, obviously, we all want our students to be successful. We want them to persist. Anything we can do to improve those outcomes is great for everybody involved. One of the ways that we do that is through having efficient solutions for our students. But one of the ways we also do it is by recognizing that a student's sense of satisfaction and happiness with the institution is an important component of whether they're going to continue in their learning and be successful. So we want to make sure we're thinking about that, measuring that, and looking to improve it when we can. And then we talked about efficiency was the last bullet point, so I won't touch on that again. But another key element that I think is sometimes overlooked here is that students are sometimes struggling with things and we don't know that they're struggling, or we don't realize that there's this one thing that half our students are worried about or stuck on because they don't come to us and tell us, or they're telling individual people here and there, but the sort of collective data is not available to us. And so what can we do to have better insights into that so we can address it upstream and solve those problems for students before they become really an issue? And so that is what a student success community, these are all the things that a student success community is designed to do. So we already talked about the idea that it's a virtual space. In many cases, these spaces bring together students with peers, but also with advisors, coaches, any sort of student leadership organizations that you have in place, and then any other members of the student success community that you would like to include, financial aid, registration. So the participation in the community and the shape and design of that community is really up to the institution. But the idea is kind of the more the merrier, and the more people you can bring together to support each other, the more successful it's going to be. The important thing about establishing a community is to create it as a safe space, to let students know here is a place that you can trust, that when you come ask a question here, it's going to be answered, and that we really welcome all questions and ideas into this collective. And by doing that, what you'll have is you'll have students raising sort of the inquiries and challenges that they're facing. And as you answer them, they become part of this knowledge repository. It's essentially a living FAQ that you are growing over time. And each interaction that you have with a student can benefit all the students in the community. So on the one hand, you're not having to answer the same question 100 times, but on the more human side, if a student shares some vulnerability with you about, or with their peers about, being nervous about returning to school, or not sure that they can balance all the things going on in their life with their education, the opportunity for other students to see that, to jump in to support that learner, and then also to recognize like, hey, I'm not the only one that's kind of feeling stressed out here, has a huge positive impact on everybody's confidence and kind of desire to persist and succeed. So the community really is designed around these different aspects, and a lot of focus on things like onboarding, helping students kind of get their feet under them. And you'll have this balance of tactical questions that are going to come in for your team, and then more the sort of human side, social connections about students just meeting each other and supporting each other. And then I just wanted to talk briefly about some of the outcomes that we've seen before we dive into the demo. So one of the things that we talked about is this idea of student satisfaction. So every institution probably thinks about this differently and measures it differently. But one of the schools that we worked with saw a huge increase in the Net Promoter Score. So it's one measure that a lot of folks use for students who are participating in the community. So just having access to that space and being able to see what other folks are talking about raises their overall sort of sense of satisfaction, connection with the institution. Also, just touching on that tactical side, significant decrease in the number of individual support requests that you'll get by creating this pooled experience. And that's real hours in your support team's day that can go back to some of those higher order activities, deeper conversations with students. So it has a real tangible impact on their day-to-day work and life. And of course, we love to see the impact on belonging. So we did a study recently with Rio Salado College, where we saw up to 40% higher reported levels of sense of belonging and peer connectedness for students who were active in the community. And we achieved those results with students in just 4 weeks. So it didn't take a whole year. It was just in about a month of participation that students really saw that benefit. And then we always think about participation. So you can expect to see, very high levels of participation in the community, because we have strategies for making it easy for students to participate. All right, I'll pause. Any questions just about the setup?
We don't have any questions at this point in time. I do want to mention that I will drop the link to that Rio Salado report that you just referenced in the chat.
Thank you so much. All right, let me see. Okay, let's jump over and just take a look at Inscribe. So I am going to demo Inscribe as a standalone experience here. I think it's worth noting that the platform is really designed for integration. So most of the time, access to your community will be, students will access the community from the tools and technology that you are already using. So whether that's a learning management system, a website, your student portal, all of the above, we can integrate into those existing experiences. And that's really critical to this idea of engagement, because if you create a separate destination where students have to go find you and it's off to the side, many of your students will never go participate there. But if you just put it in the path of where they're already going, or where they're probably going to be when they have a question, that's when you start to achieve those really high participation rates. But just to keep it simple, I'm going to demo a standalone to start, and then I'll show you one example of an integrated experience. So just to orient us, we're in the Inscribe organization. We are in the coaching and student success community. So very common for an institution to have multiple communities that cover different topics and focuses. And the students can jump between communities that they've been given access to. The majority of the content in your community will be organized by topic. So in this case, we have a social space for students to connect, an area around study skills and how to get going quickly, and then a section on financial aid. We, through the work with institutions, have some templates for what we've seen work really well in terms of community design, but this is 100% customizable. So you can change it to reflect the language that you use with your students and the areas that are top of mind for them. We also have something called channels in our community. So these are optional. Depending on the size of your institution, you may choose to use these or not. And they're like subgroups in the community. So you'd have one space where everyone is together, but then you might have smaller spaces where you could get a collective group together. So in this example, we have a place for student parents to come together. We have a place for just the fall 2022 cohort that's coming in. So again, lots of flexibility there. And it's just a way to give a more focused conversation to a subgroup of your community. Excuse me.
There is a question. I was trying to respond to it, but I think I'm just going to ask you live.
Okay.
So we have an audience member that uses Facebook groups. And they've mentioned the never-ending scrolling that happens within Facebook groups. You've talked about topics a little bit and the different infinity groups that you have in this specific channel, or this specific community, excuse me. And they're seeing that some students don't actually want to use Facebook in general, let alone go in there and join a group. So can you just give can you give an example of how Inscribe might be different than Facebook, and just what would you typically we're just going to leave it at that. One of those mornings I'm rambling.
So I think there's a lot of differences between an application like Inscribe and using Facebook, especially today, where I think there's a little more resistance to being in Facebook from a lot of people. So one thing you mentioned is infinite scroll. Pure social sites are designed to be very transactional. They're really not designed to be a repository of knowledge and information. And so, as we all know, I think Slack's also kind of a good example of that, where if somebody's there to answer my question right away, it's helpful. But if I come in 2 days later and somebody has answered something, good luck ever finding that again. So we took a slightly different approach with Inscribe, which is it's absolutely designed for quick response, question and answer, but we take every interaction and put it in a searchable repository. So when a learner comes in, if they have a particular question, let's say about registration, they can search for it, and we will search through all of the content in the site to try to return them to a solution, essentially to get them to an answer right away. So that's one aspect of the reusability of content. We actually integrate that process into the question asking process as well. So if I skip the search process and just go straight to asking a question. Do I not have this? Oh, wait, there we go. So this is Rosie. She's the technology assistant that lives in our communities. And you can see here, as I'm typing out my question, she's actually recommending solutions to me right away. So it's not super invasive, but it's there. And the idea is if we can get you to an answer faster, it's better for you. And if you don't post a duplicate question, it's one less thing that the institution has to deal with. So I think that's one of the differences that we see between Inscribe and a social site like Facebook. I'll just speak quickly about some of the other things. So access, I think, is a really important one. Not everybody has a Facebook account. Not everybody wants a Facebook account. And so by putting your content into that location, you're sort of automatically excluding a certain portion of your population. Inscribe, on the other hand, because it is integrated directly into your school systems, students are just using their school credentials to access it, usually through single sign-on. there is no additional login or anything required. And so every student has equal access and equal opportunity for participation. And then the last thing, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, is just data. Most social sites do not provide much in the way of analytics to you about what people are really talking about, who's being active in the community, which topics are super popular. Whereas Inscribe provides very detailed information about the behaviors of folks in the community, where activity seems to be congregating. And our goal is really to make it actionable for you so that you can learn something from the community and take that back to improve the student experience elsewhere. So those are 3 things. We can go probably talk about that for a long time, but and we do have a lot of schools who have abandoned Facebook with the with the idea of moving to this more integrated experience.
Thank you, Katie. That was a perfectly structured response to a horribly structured question. So I appreciate that. And Rachel in the audience appreciates it as well.
Thank you. Since we're in here, let's talk a little bit about the question asking process. So we looked at search and this idea that, let's get you to solutions that are existing, but there will be new questions that come in. I'm really bad at talking and typing. See, I told you. So I'm not going to type something very long. But just know that when a student posts, they can choose to ask a question, which means I need help, or they can share something with the community. And this is true for moderators as well. They can, share a resource, an idea, an opportunity that they think might benefit all the members of the community. You can use images, videos, links to other websites. So lots of ways to bring multimedia into the experience as well. You can tag your question to one or multiple topics. And then one thing that's very important is that we want to give the participants in your community a lot of agency over how they are represented and how they participate in the space. And we want to make it as easy as possible for everyone to participate. One of the ways that we do that is when a student posts, they can control the visibility of their post. So is it going to be visible to everybody? Is it going to be visible to everybody, but I'm actually anonymous, so I'm posting this anonymously? Or do I only want the moderators of the community to see what I'm asking? And for people who are quite shy or maybe aren't ready to put themselves out there, these are really important features to ease that process for them and make sure that they don't get excluded from the conversation. I'm going to post it to all members for now. So when I post that, it'll automatically appear in the community, and all the members of the community get a notification. You can control your notifications quite in a pretty granular way. So you can see here in our notification settings, there's lots of different ways to slice and dice your notifications, and you can ask to silence them, get that notification right away, or have it come to me in a daily digest. So each member can customize the notifications based on what works for them. We also are releasing in the next week or 2 a native mobile app. So all students will be able to access all of this on their phone as well, and they can get app notifications, well, not just students, any member of your community can get app notifications about what's happening. So this is also a really important engagement feature. You can't expect your students to be coming to the community all the time to check in and see what's going on. So it's very important that the community is reaching out to them to let them know what's happening and to let them know when their peers maybe need help or assistance. And we see that reflected in the analytics across our communities, specifically in the number of views that content gets. The demo community is not going to do a good job of that, but it's not uncommon for posts to get hundreds or thousands of views because we're making sure that we're pushing that content out to the folks that we know it will be relevant to. Just a couple of things on this. So when we go to answer a question, communities are really designed to encourage peer-to-peer answers as well. So anybody can answer. There's no limit to the number of answers. I can't talk and type. I can't even figure out what's wrong with that. Again, you have the same WYSIWYG, and when that answer gets posted, the person who asked the question will be alerted and notified. I'm a moderator in this community, so I carry this little badge with me. That's a visual indicator to the members of the community when sort of an authorized post or a authorized answer is being provided. If I were a student, I wouldn't have that visual cue, but a moderator could come in and endorse my post. So it's a way to add that sort of certification that this is a great answer, or an answer that a coach or advisor would also have given. It gives the student who gave it a little bit of credit, which we'll look at in a second in terms of providing a great answer. And now the other members of the community kind of know that maybe I'll look at that response first.
Hey, Katie, there is a question in regards to moderators. So who typically moderates the community? And then on average, what's the weekly workload for the moderator?
So usually in a student success community, we often see moderation coming from advisors or coaches. Kind of depends on the institution and how they have things set up. But it's really up to you. And so what we normally say is, based on the topics that you have in the community, who's normally answering those questions? Like, who's the one fielding the emails generally? Let's move that away from email and into this community space and give those folks access so that they can answer and respond to the things that are relevant to them. Workload is actually a lot lighter, I think, than people expect. And the reason is that you're not adding, generally speaking, you're not adding additional questions to the mix. You're taking questions that were coming in from 30 different places, phone calls, email, somebody walking in the door, maybe you have a chat feature, and congregating them into a single location. So you're really shifting your work from one space to another. People have told us on average, maybe an hour a week, spread out over days to make sure that they're in there answering questions and kind of keeping an eye on what's happening in the community space. But it goes back to, we consistently see, I think we had the statistic of a 23% decrease in the number of individual support requests coming in, and that's on the low end. So we have had other communities report up to an 80% decrease in the number of individual emails that they're getting. So it's really about saving time. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah.
I will touch briefly on the resources area. So the conversation space is very student driven, very iterative. I mean, that's where the content's going to kind of be flowing into the community. But we also have a resources space generally reserved just for the moderators. And it is where, if you have like some extra videos or articles or websites that you want to link to, you can build a little repository of that content here. A lot of times people already have some content, and so we'll upload it for them. You don't need to have like a really complicated built out repository of resources to start. In fact, we often encourage people to, like, whatever you have, let's put it in here. And then what the best thing to do is to just observe the questions that are coming into the conversations area. And if you see a consistent drumbeat or a particular topic that's coming up over and over, that might be an indication that a more robust article or video addressing that and putting that in the repository would be useful or warranted. So it tends to iterate over time, but maybe a little more slowly than the conversation space. And then the last feature I'm excited to talk about is our live session feature, which we recently added. So we can see that there is a live session happening right now. It's the financial aid Q&A session that was scheduled today at 11 a.m. And when the student first comes into the community, they'll get an alert over here about the session and be able to access it. The live sessions are designed to give you the opportunity to complement what your asynchronous community with synchronous activities over time. But what's really neat about having them inside your asynchronous space is that you take what would be kind of a one and done moment and turning it into a longer conversation that can happen both before and after the event. So you can see here, we posted this. When it was posted, everybody in the community got a notification. They can add the event to their calendar. Just before the session starts, they'll get another notification letting them know that it's starting. I can come in and click the join live session just from here. And I'll talk about that join in 1 second. But when it was first posted, I can come in and see, and let's just say I have a particular question about financial aid that I really want to have answered. I could type that question here and tag it to the session. And now the leader of the session knows, okay, here's 2 or 3 things people are really thinking about. I'm going to make sure I cover it in the live session. And then if you record your live session, you can come back and add it to this post. And now those students that weren't able to make it can watch that recording and maybe ask some follow-up questions in the platform. And so again, you're taking what was a point in time and really turning it into a longer back and forth opportunity. The live sessions are designed to use whatever meeting or synchronous tool that you already use on your campus. So you just give it a title, a time, a little bit more information, and then you drop in whatever link you want. So whether that's Zoom or Teams or some other application that you're using, it will just automatically work and integrate directly from the Inscribe platform.
I do have a question that just came in. Is there a way to lock down the community so that only, this is financial aid, advisors can answer the questions?
Yes, you can do that. So that's a good question. And we do have some communities, especially in this space, that will do that. And that's all done through the roles of the community. So we have a particular role that allows students to come in, view everything, browse, ask questions, but it restricts their ability to answer. And then the moderators would be then the only ones able to come in and answer those questions. So that is doable.
All right, George, hopefully that answered your question. If it did not, go ahead and follow up with another question in the chat.
Awesome. And I know there was this question specifically about how to use this for the financial aid office. So I would just take what, this larger community, which encompasses many aspects of student success, and we would just narrow down the topics and the focus to those things that are related specifically to financial aid. Moderators would likely be the folks from your financial aid office. And so it's really more about just like narrowing the scope of the community down to that particular subset of individuals. And then again, yeah, if you wanted to kind of lock it down so they were really the ones providing the answers, that could be done as well. Awesome. So I mentioned Rosie a little earlier in the conversation, and we saw the role that she plays in helping connect students to solutions. She also is working behind the scenes to kind of monitor the health of the community, and doing that in 2 ways. One is that we have a list of keywords, and if one of those keywords ever gets posted, Rosie will flag it and escalate it to somebody. So you can imagine there's a lot of swear words in that list. We really don't see that as an issue in communities. We talked about this a little bit for those of you that attended the webinar yesterday, a little bit in the webinar yesterday, about how the fact that the community is integrated into your school systems and is not sort of a separate social site over there drives a different level of professionalism and a different level of behavior from your student participants. So we don't really see students, if ever, I mean, I don't even think I have an example of posting things that are inappropriate, but that list can also capture phrases that might be a high priority for you. So dropping out, FAFSA, or things that are like keywords that you want to really get on to quickly. We can include that in that list as well. The other thing Rosie does is she runs all the conversations through a sentiment API. So if a particular post is demonstrating somebody who's really frustrated or getting upset, we can sense that automatically and again, escalate that. So here's an example of a post where students kind of getting close, not sure that they're going to make it. This is probably an individual that you want to reach out to right away. Make sure that you have that conversation with very quickly. So Rosie has flagged it and escalated it for you. Somebody will kind of get that notification and be able to jump on it right away. All right. So so we have some tools for moderators that allow you to just get to things that haven't been answered before. You can get quickly to questions that maybe have a student response, but not a moderator response. So lots of ways to manage the scalability of the platform. And then I talked about the idea of analytics. So you do have some analytics built into the community itself. They'll give you kind of a nice overview of what's happening in your community, who the participants are, what they've been up to. You can also see the individuals who are most active, the contributions that have been most active. We also can export this. You can export any of this data giving it a particular start and end date. So if you want to combine it with data from other platforms, or if you want to run more analysis on it, you can download these individual member reports, individual conversation and resource reports as well. And then I think it's good to know that behind the scenes, we are tracking what we call learning event level data. So every interaction of your participants with the community is getting logged in a data repository. That's obviously a very large data set, so we don't make it available here in the app, but we can provide that to you either through API or export. If you have a data lake or a data repository somewhere, we can put it there. And it's a really rich set of data that you can use to understand individual student behaviors, collective student behaviors, and combine it with other information like student outcomes, student progress, to get a more holistic picture of the community and how it may be positively impacting your students. All right, questions, Danielle?
Yes, so there is a question. Can we bring in external people from outside of the institution into a community, such as prospective students, alumni, maybe local hiring companies?
Absolutely. So you have total control over who gets into your community. And that can include people who are outside of your institution. So prospective students and alumni are ones that, you know, we see a lot. People wanting to kind of welcome them into the institutional community quickly and early, or, you know, maintain that conversation and that opportunity for a connection even after they've graduated. Alumni in particular are like wonderful community members because, you know, they have an affinity for your institution already. They have so much knowledge and experience. And in my experience, are very generous and willing to share that back with your student population. So if you have an opportunity to include them, I think that's really great. But it can also include people just from the community. So hiring companies or people who have a particular expertise in a certain area, or if you just want to bring in a cool speaker at some point and publicize that in your community, you can do that as well.
Thank you.
One other quick thing to touch on here, and then I will show some integrated views, is the learner profile. So this is also a place where we give the participants control over how they appear. So I can change my picture, I can change my display name, talk a little bit about myself, provide some opportunities for connection. If I change this, that's what will be presented to the other members of the community. As a moderator, I can always see the sort of true name and contact information of that individual. This information is only visible to moderators. So the other members of their community will not be able to see your personal information unless you've chosen to share that in some way here in your profile. You can also see here the reputation system in the platform that's built into the platform. So we give our participants credit for their activities in the space and for the impact that their activities have on the other members of the community. So, you know, am I initiating conversation, and are other people engaging with that? What answers have I provided, and how valuable are those answers? Are they getting a lot of views? Am I getting a lot of endorsements? And then I always say, because it's very important, we have this good listener badge, which is really just about, are you actively consuming the content of your community? And your community participation will likely look like most online communities. So you'll have about 20% of the population who's doing most of the content contribution, asking questions, providing answers, like really jumping in. And then a bigger portion who are consuming that content and maybe not raising their hand all the time. But I think we all recognize how much value there is in just seeing what other people are asking and what other people are sharing and what you can learn from that and how beneficial that is. So that's why we think this views and reactions piece is really important, making sure that you also give that population credit for the participation that they bring to the table. Awesome. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'm going to jump quickly over to look at an integrated view. Are we good?
There is a question.
Okay.
Switching gears real quick. How long does it typically take for implementation of communities?
So in terms of like a duration of time, I would say 2 to 4 weeks, and that's driven primarily by getting people's time and attention. but the actual, sort of time on task to get the communities launched is very small. We have templates that we can bring to the table. So community design is done for you unless you want to make a lot of modifications and adjustments. Those modifications can also be made later. So it's not like if they're not in place on day one, that's not catastrophic. Your community is always adaptable and can change over time. And then we have the technical integration piece. So that's usually LTI and SSO. So it's just getting, but all standards based. So quite simple to do, just getting the attention of that team. And then we'll do a training for you and your moderators, getting them up to speed, and then spend a little time with you just thinking through how you want to announce the community, launch it, and get in front of your students. That's also a place where we have a lot of templates and materials that we can provide. So those are really the 4 main tasks. And depending on how quickly we get on people's calendars, it can go as quickly as 1 week. But I would say 2 to 3 weeks is more like on average.
Great questions coming into the chat. Please keep them coming. And I'll interrupt Katie as they come in.
Awesome. So this was a good example of a standalone community. Integration is also possible. We do see with these student success communities that a lot of times they are introduced and integrated into like your student orientation module in your learning management system. It's great to have that as a way to, as I said, sort of introduce students to the concept of the community, get them in there, maybe get them introducing themselves. We don't recommend that this is the only access point, because once your students are done with their LMS orientation, they don't usually go back to it. So we also would look with you at your student portal or your student websites, other places that students are going. But just to give you a sense of how the LMS integration works, you can have a single link to the community in the left-hand navigation. The LMS integrated view also uses what we call our embedded homepage. So this is really the same content that we were looking at over here. It's just redesigned to live within the LMS interface. So we're iframing in here. And you can also create links from individual pages or individual modules. So in this case, we have a link here that's going to launch us out to Inscribe. And because we were focused on getting a strong start, we've now pre-filtered the view in the community down to that topic area. So any link that you create can also have that kind of filtering component to it as well. And then I don't know if we have it built into the modules in this example. Let's find out. So you can create it as what I would call a content item within a module as well. So lots of ways to integrate it into the LMS. You can keep it very simple. Or you could kind of really weave it into the content and design of the space. So that's one option. We also generally, as I mentioned, recommend like a website or a portal integration. What was I going to look up? So this is an example from one of our partners who uses Inscribe as a student success solution for their medical students. So this is their website. And then they built out this page on the website just using basic HTML, but to provide that access point to Inscribe. So students can search or ask questions directly from the website, and it will launch them to search results in the community. Or these were the topics that were most popular, so they can click on one of those topics and it will launch them into the community right to that topic area, and they can see the content and the solutions that are relevant there. So, this can be quite powerful, especially if students are coming to your websites a lot without a lot of work. I mean, it doesn't require, a special coding or anything like that. And it just creates another access point. But in terms of access, we are also doing the work to reach out to your students to draw them back in. So we're sending those email notifications, we're sending those mobile notifications, and that's another way that we're drawing that back in and encouraging their participation that doesn't rely on, them having to come and find us. Okay, other questions, Danielle?
Not at this time.
Awesome. So that is a pretty good overview of the application and how it works. Again, we, especially in the coaching and student success area, the metrics that we are always looking at and measuring with our partners are things related to the efficiency of the support teams, how are we giving them time hours back in their day to support a larger number of students or to do more detailed interventions with the students that they serve. So if we were to partner with you, that would be one thing that we would hope to measure in partnership with you, as we've done with other institutions. And then we definitely look at student success. So are more students persisting? Are more students succeeding? How have we impacted measures of belonging and connectedness for your learners? And I know Danielle shared the Rio study that we did. We actually also have kind of templatize that study so that we can recreate it and repeat it with other institutions. So if belonging is something that you're really interested in, you want to measure it, but you're not sure how, we have a strategy and an entire sort of research path that we can go on with you. Again, it takes, about 4 to 8 weeks to run that study, that first part of that study together, and with something we obviously bring to the table if we were to work with you.